welcome to Take Me Back the Interviews. This is our 12th episode, and we're really excited to have another community member on, which is what we do, to talk about memories of the Mad River Valley, but to also allow the conversation to kind of flow wherever it goes. Today's guest is Amy Todisco.
Yes.
I want to pronounce it correctly. And she's the co-creator at Hartshorn Farm. Everybody knows Hartshorn Farm. A beautiful farm stand is open now. I admire it every time I go by. And for over 28 years, Amy has been a nationally recognized green living expert. So I certainly want to know more than that, more about that, because it's one of those things you think you know, but until you clarify first.
Yep.
So I have some questions just on the intro, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Absolutely. Go for it.
What does it mean to you to be a co-creator?
Well, it's funny because co-creator is a word that I heard. I don't know if you've ever heard of Abraham Hicks.
Yes.
So she or they, I guess she channels this entity.
Yeah.
Talk about being co-creators. And so for me, in this particular situation with Hartshorn Farm, I feel like I've helped Dave grow the farm into new directions than when I first arrived 14 years ago.
And I'm thinking, which we'll get into more, grow the farm into kind of unique businesses, sub-businesses, whatever we want to call them.
Yes.
You've been a green living expert for 28 years, so let's go there. What does that mean?
Right. So that's a great question because I think green living is not necessarily well understood. I think a lot of people think of green living as, focused on recycling, carbon footprint. All of those things are a part of it. The part that I focus on the most are the things that people can do themselves. So what you choose for food, what you choose for household products, how you decorate your home, whether you're using carpets and which paint. So everything that creates indoor air pollution potentially, I focus on that so that people can make more informed decisions. And so my whole goal is to really help sort of guide and inspire people towards a healthier, less toxic, more earth-friendly life.
And probably, I wouldn't even be aware of some of the things you're talking about if you weren't talking about it. So that sounds very valuable to me.
Thank you.
The other credential here, I also need explanation. A transformational life reinvention coach.
Yes, that is a mouthful.
For 14 years you've been doing this.
Yes, indeed. So what I mean by that is typically I work with people one-on-one who have been through some sort of a life change, whether it's a divorce, a loss of a partner, empty nest, retirement, something where life is different and they need to sort of reinvent who they want to be, what they want to do. So what that looks like typically is a lot of people want to start their own business. Many of them leave the corporate world and are fed up with that, so they want to do something that they're passionate about, or it's moving to a new location, starting a new career, attracting and meeting a soulmate. So it's a variety of different things, but the reason that I love that particular group of people so much is because when we are in that place, we tend to be much more open. And so we can see things differently than when we're just doing things the same way each day, going to the same job, having the same, partner, raising kids, all that. When those different things change, it's a time to focus on ourselves and figure out, okay, what do I really want to do with this life?
I like what you said because anybody who knows me knows this. I tell all my friends at my age, if life is a 3-act play, I want the third act to be a grand finale.
Oh, me too.
And that takes a lot of intentionality.
Yes, indeed.
So what you're helping people organize their ideas.
Exactly. So it's a clarity thing. So helping people get really clear on what is it that they want to do, because a lot of times we don't know. Many of us, especially women, I think, are so busy taking care of other people that we don't always focus on, what is it that really gives me joy? What am I passionate about? What difference do I want to make in the world? And those are the kinds of things that I love to work with people on. And I was kind of getting fairly well known for vision board workshops.
Yeah.
I've been using them since I was a teenager, I think. And I remember particularly, I used to live in Massachusetts before I moved up to Vermont. I've actually lived in Vermont longer than anywhere else, 22 years, but I lived in Mass. And one of my friends, after I moved to Vermont, said, oh my gosh, you got almost everything you had on your vision board to come true. Like, yes, I did. That's right.
Well, like, I've done vision boards as well, and I think you kind of plant a seed in the back of your mind, and so
Yes.
day by day as you're making choices. Although this whole topic fascinates me. I didn't know I wanted to be a writer.
Oh, no kidding.
It took me a long time to work my way through college. I was alone as a teenager. I'll just say that.
Okay.
Yes, it was very difficult. So I worked my way through finishing high school and then worked my way through college. It took 6 years. And my son Jonathan calls it my poverty mentality. That because I was literally hungry for years. Like I had to choose like heat or food sometimes.
Oof.
I'm stuck in that.
Ah.
You see, so
Yes, I understand.
I took my math and science teaching very seriously, and I would take the extra tutoring and the being the head of the department or whatever, but there was just never enough to make me feel safe. Certainly not to sit there and spend hours writing.
Oh, wow.
But it was accidental that I fell into writing a book, and now I realize it's the thing that gives me the most joy, second to my children.
Right.
Right. Oh, I better say my husband too.
Oh, that's right. So were you able to make the shift out of that poverty mentality to allow yourself to write?
I wrote my first book when I was 60. I published my first book when I was 60. I'm 68. It took me a long time to let go. My husband kept calling me on it. You're really okay, you can get your pension now, work fine.
Yeah.
But now that I'm in it,
Yeah.
nothing gives me more pleasure.
That's awesome.
So that's what it sounds like you're trying to get people. You may not always know what it is, the next
Exactly.
phase.
And I think you bring up a really interesting perspective, that this poverty mentality, which I think a lot of us have, depending upon how we were raised and what we grew up with, the whole idea of uncovering what the beliefs are that we hold on to that often get in our way, because they don't even belong to us. Many of the beliefs that we carry with us are having been programmed into us as young children, not intentionally.
Right.
But, our parents have all these different beliefs that were programmed into them. They share them with us, whether it's like a conscious or even an unconscious way of communicating it. Society, teachers, friends. I mean, we're constantly being given messages, and the ones that we take on and use are the ones that we have to look at and say, does that really work for me? Do I really believe that? Do I want to believe that?
Right.
And I think that's a really key piece for all of us, to unravel who we are, what we believe, and whether we want to continue believing certain things or do we want to move in a different direction.
So, I don't think that many people would have your background and say, Hartshorn Farm, perfect place.
Well, that's funny. So the part that was perfect was the green living thing, right? So actually, Dave and I met on Match.com. And, I see this profile of this hunky-looking organic farmer, and I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty amazing. Organic farming.
Hunky-looking organic farmer.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, and what's really weird is when I moved up here, I was married to somebody else. I moved up with my former husband and my daughter, and one time when my mother came to visit, we came here to the Mad River Valley. It was my first time here. I never got as far as the farm. I only got to like the glass blowing studio, and we checked that out, and there was a quilt shop.
Yes.
Yeah, but if I had known that there was an organic farm here, we would have been there in a heartbeat. But I thought, how interesting. Obviously, it was not the time that I was supposed to meet Dave, because I don't know if he was married to somebody else at that time or what, but I was already married. But I just thought it was so interesting that I had come to visit here and didn't even know that there was a farm, because I was all about going to organic farms.
Well, life takes us in many different directions.
Indeed it does.
Okay, I'm still working through your credentials now. But I'm going to skip.
Yeah,
I'm going
go
to
right
skip
ahead.
one bullet and I'll go back to it.
Okay.
I must say, I am a closet but rabid Oprah Winfrey fan. So when I see, Oprah Winfrey in your bio, tell us, what was that
It is a
experience?
crazy story that I almost can't believe it happened, almost. I mean, it was the thing that almost happened that didn't. So what happened was I got a call from one of her producers, and this was when I was living in Huntington. And she was very intrigued by my green living stuff, because at that point I had a consulting business, and I was writing a regular newsletter, And so I was constantly educating people about green living topics, but also I would go to somebody's home and, help them look through their products under the sink or in the, bathroom cabinet and give them information. In fact, one of my clients was one of the band members of Fish, which was pretty cool.
That is very cool.
But so I got this call from the producer, and she said, Oprah would like to come to your home in Vermont and
What?
interview you about your green living lifestyle. And I thought, what? Are you serious? Is this really?
This really happened?
This really happened.
How did I miss this?
But she never came.
Oh.
So at the last minute, she went with a nonprofit. And actually, I was relieved because I was nowhere near ready to have that kind of notoriety. I didn't have anything set up, to take advantage of that. So now my intention is to be on her Super Soul Sunday conversation.
Oh, I love Super Soul Sunday. So, Oprah, if you're listening.
Exactly.
Amy's
and I wrote
ready.
this in a Disrupt magazine article, too, because I'm like, I'm putting it out to the universe.
Well, that would, I just wouldn't even know what to say to her, but that would be fabulous. One more credential that's listed here, personal growth and wellness retreat leader for almost 9 years. And I'm suspecting this has something to do with the farm.
It does. So I did my first retreat on the farm 9 years ago, and I did it as a pilot program. And I actually did it under the auspices of a nonprofit called Pathways for Veterans, which was in California. I'm not even sure if they're still around. And the whole reason that got started was this man who runs the nonprofit contacted me and said, I'd really like to buy your organic gardening e-course because I want to use it with my female veterans in this program that I'm doing. And I thought, that's interesting. Sure. And so we kept talking. And the more we talked, and I started to understand what his vision was, that he really wanted to help women veterans because he felt that they were the most underserved and help them sort of reestablish back into their lives after being, in the military. And so I was thinking about it as I was talking to him, and I thought, wow, I could do something more than just this course. I could actually create a program for female veterans. I wonder how many there are in Vermont that might be interested. So I went to one of the veteran events, I forget what it was, where they introduced them to all these different types of healing modalities, and I think there was a lot more to it than that, but I gave a little talk and I got some interest and I thought, this is kind of intriguing. So I created this program. It was actually a 5 days a week, so 20-day program. I had women coming from 8 to 4 each day. I don't even know how I came up with enough stuff for us all to do. But and it was actually women veterans and also non-veterans, because I wanted to bring the two groups together, because one of the things I had understood was female veterans feel very disconnected from society. It's really hard to sort of reintegrate back in. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could, make these connections happen? So the first part of the program each day was mindfulness. We did all kinds of mindfulness activities, and I had a psychologist.
Inside or outside?
Both. So at that time, the farm stand was the sugar house of today. And there was a little back room that I cleaned out and put a carpet in. And I remember sitting in circles and having these giant spiders coming down. And people were like totally freaking out because they were giant, wolf spiders. But after we got through that freaked outness, we did a lot of indoor activities as far as the mindfulness, but then we would go and take a walk, like a silent walk in the woods. And then people would have notebooks to jot down different things that came to them as they were walking. We did a lot with the organic gardening. I took them to the hydroponic greenhouse because Dave was, co-owner at that time with the Farr brothers. We did this incredible experience with horses, and that, I would say, was definitely a key piece and became a key piece of future retreats, which were much shorter. The next generation of them were like 5 days. But what we did was I brought them to this horse trainer woman who's a horse whisperer. And they did all these different activities. They would lead the horse, or they would see if the horse led them, and that would give a lot of information about how they showed up in the world. And so I remember one of the participants saying, "This horse is acting just like my toddler." And I thought, interesting. So then they got an experience to be in a round pen. Do you know what that is? like a gated circle, essentially.
They
where
train horses in them? Yeah.
Right, and it's high enough so they can't jump out. And so each woman had a chance to be in the center of that circle with Peggy, the trainer, and a horse. And so the goal was you move that horse around you on the outside of the circle, but you're not touching them. You're just using a lead rope to sort of spin towards the back of them to get them to move, and then you want them to switch directions. Well, this is called Join Up, and it was made famous by Monty Roberts, who is out in California, and he's actually done a lot of work with veterans and healing PTSD and that sort of thing. And so the whole goal of this experience is to literally join up. So after a certain period of time, the horse gets tired, but also they don't like to be on an outside of a circle. They want to be in the center, because in horse world, it's safer to be, with the group. You don't want to be on the outskirts, because those are the horses that get plucked by the mountain lions and whatnot. So they show these different signs. They drop their head. They do this thing where they lick and chew. And at that point, Peggy and the person turn their back and drop their body posture so they're relaxed. They drop the rope. And the horse then gets to decide whether they want to join up with those two people. And so what always happens, I've not seen it not work, is the horse walks over, and then you'll start to feel like breathing on your neck, and maybe they'll sort of nudge your shoulder, and then at that point you turn around and you pet them and love on them, and then you can walk around that pen and they follow you, and you don't even have any lead rope or anything. They just want to be with you. It's really quite a remarkable experience, and that was such a powerful thing, especially for the veteran women who had been through so many different kinds of trauma, whether it was, seeing people die or having sexual assaults while they were in the military. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And they transformed. In fact, one of the women, when she started the program, she was actively drinking. She told us that she was an alcoholic. She didn't drink at all when we were together. But by the end of it, she completely became sober, and she's still sober today. Like 9 years later, married with kids.
It's making me mindful as we've done these. This is our 12th episode. Some of the people we have had on, of course, grew up on farms here in the Valley.
Yeah.
And, I asked 2 or 3 of them, because I'm from New Jersey, right? I'm from
New York.
The track houses. We didn't have animals. I mean, certainly not farm animals.
Right.
I think maybe once in my life, we were bussed out to a farm out in West Jersey. Wow. But I couldn't get close to them.
Yeah.
So, I wondered how children could grow up around them and be safe.
Yeah.
And all of the people asked this question were so surprised. And
I totally get it.
What they what they helped me understand is there weren't many people on the farms. You were very close to your family.
Right.
And you were very close to your animals.
Exactly.
And the animals and you grew up together.
That's right. So in Dave's case, he grew up on a dairy farm.
Yeah.
He and his dad were dairy farmers, right next door to where the farm stand is. And he spent countless hours with those cows. And, some of them became friends.
That's what they're
Yeah.
telling me. And it was a big surprise to me.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
But it seems
Well,
like
I
there's
do. I
go
do,
ahead.
because I feel like there's a really unique human-animal connection that happens. And especially if you feel comfortable. I mean, I think it takes a little bit of work maybe for some people that have grown up in cities, but not for me. Even though I grew up in New York, I couldn't wait to be with animals. But I feel like they are usually unconditionally loving, especially dogs. But horses and cows, I feel like there's a lot more complexity to these animals' emotions than often humans will give them credit for. I had horses up until a year ago, March, and I adopted this horse, Cocapelli, when he was only 4 months old, and I saved him from a Premarin farm up in Canada. And that was an absolutely life-changing experience for me. And that's part of why I wanted to introduce the horse piece into this retreat, because I knew how much I had learned from him. And one of the biggest things that I had learned, and just thinking about feeling safe, I would wake up, when this guy was a colt, I would wake up thinking, how am I going to get through the day alive? Literally, because once he got comfortable after the first week, then he would be running around the paddock area, and at feeding time, he would get really excited. So I figured out these ways to work with him so that I could project confidence and also be safe. So the first time I put a halter on him, I did it over the door of the little shelter that I built him. And then, got him to move back and forth with a lead line. I learned a lot of stuff from this Pat Pirelli. I got the whole DVD series. I was like watching all these different DVDs to learn these skills so that I could help both of us communicate and, work together. And it was amazing.
Well, there was I can't remember the name of the documentary, a fantastic documentary about elephants. By the end of it, I was totally convinced that animals communicate in a different way, but they communicate if we're paying attention.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's funny because humans actually communicate with body language at a really high percent, but most of us don't realize it because we think it's words
Right.
or expressions, right? Well, I mean, I guess expressions
I've heard
is part of body language.
97% is body language. That's what I've
probably
heard.
true. Yes, I think I knew it was something in the 90s.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it, that's what animals do. I mean, they make some sounds too, but 97% or more is body language. And so when I'm thinking about horses in particular, there's a way that horses interact with each other. If a horse is upset, their ears flatten and they push their heads out, and maybe they'll stomp their foot. And there's this whole communication that happens, where the lead horse, usually it's a female, is the one that tells everybody when it's time to eat, when it's time to get water, when to move out of the way. Whereas the stallion in the wild would be the one that would be the protector, sort of keeping, watch on everybody and sort of staying around the outskirts to make sure that there's nobody coming to hurt them. But it would be the female, most likely, that would say, let's get out of here, and everyone runs.
I'm wondering, I should have emailed you this question because it's loaded.
Okay.
But I bet you seem to be up to the task.
Okay.
Of course, we had all 4 of the Hartshorn siblings here.
Oh, you did?
We were so thrilled.
Wow.
They didn't want to be on television, but that was okay. Tony made it work. We had.
Wait, you had Dave too?
No, we had Paul.
Oh,
and
that
Butch
generation. Oh,
and
gotcha.
Zelda.
Okay,
Yeah,
the
that
older
generation.
generation.
Yes.
Okay, they didn't want to be on camera.
They didn't want to be on camera, but they were willing to talk.
Okay.
And they did a terrific job. I had no idea, for example, how funny they are.
Oh, and the stories.
Tremendous.
I videotaped them talking around a kitchen table just to get some of the family stories documented.
Well, that's what we kind of did. Tony had
cool.
them out at the conference table, and we had a photograph that they had given us, and we just, like I said, the really important thing is to record the stories
Yes,
for posterity.
I agree with you.
So I know about their early life.
Okay.
I'm wondering about a sweeping portrait. When did Paul and Marie,
Yes.
Paul's wife Marie,
Yes.
when did they start the farm? What did it look like then,
Good question. So
as opposed to what it looks like now?
right. So my understanding was that he was 18 when he bought the farm, and his father had died young, and so he, I believe, borrowed the insurance money from his mother to purchase the farm.
Wow.
And it was a pretty good tract of land. I think something in the range of 100 acres. So they lived in the farmhouse where the Lascarises live currently, and that barn was the dairy barn. And so it was interesting because Paul loves logging and milling. I think that's really his passion. At the time, I'm not sure exactly how he got into dairy, but so he was doing the dairy farming, and of course Dave, being the only boy, ended up being his right-hand man. And then I think it was the 1980s when the U.S. government said they were trying to buy people's herds and get them to stop producing so much milk. It's kind of an odd way of...
What year was that?
I want to say like 1984. It was somewhere in the 1980s.
Okay.
And so at that point, I guess Paul had already started to get back into the woods, and Dave was really running the dairy. And he said, do you want to keep doing this? Because I don't. I want to get back into the woods and do, the lumber and milling, because he's got this really amazing, like 100-year-old mill. It's actually the second 100-year-old mill because he just got new equipment.
Wow, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it's wild. I took some video of it actually during our farm immersion program, which is a whole nother topic. So Dave did not want to continue doing the dairy, and he was in school up in Burlington for marketing and agriculture. And I tell this story a lot for the tours, but somebody handed him handful of pumpkin seeds, which he casually tossed over his shoulder into the compost pile. Didn't think anything of it until the fall when all the greens died back, and there were these giant orange pumpkins, and he thought, oh, those are really cool. So he stacked them up on the porch there right on Route 100. And eventually people started to stop, and they wanted to take pictures, and then somebody who had a store, I guess, down here said, oh, I'd really like to buy some pumpkins for my store to display. And it's like, oh, sure.
I wonder if that was Mr. Tucker,
Oh, I don't know.
because he had the
Dave, I
lands-
think, remembers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he started selling pumpkins, and he was doing it with a honor system, like a little basket. And so neighbors were collecting the money when it would start to overflow because they were afraid it was going to get stolen. And he was, the first season, he was very intrigued by this. And so the next season, he plowed up the whole back, I don't know how many acres, and planted all pumpkins and ended up financing his college through pumpkin sales.
Amazing.
So that spark went off, and he thought, ooh, roadside farm stand. What a perfect location here on Route 100.
Yeah.
And so that's what inspired him to start the first farm stand, which, as I said earlier, is currently the Sugar House. But that smaller building was what he started in. And then we built the bigger one, I guess, right before Irene. We just had the cement laid, thankfully, and not any
Yeah.
of the wood. So that was, 11 years ago.
So that's taking us toward the present.
Yes.
Because now Dave's growing,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And Paul's returned to his first love,
Correct.
working in the woods.
Yes.
And I know all kinds of things go on there now.
Oh,
Can,
yeah.
Can you list them all? The
Yeah,
activities?
so we had more activities pre-COVID, which we haven't really resurrected, but we were doing a few farm-to-table dinners where I was actually doing all the cooking, and then Dave and I would tell stories while people were eating, and we used the pizza oven, and that was really fun, but a lot of work. We're like, this is cool, but we don't
Yeah.
want to have to do all of it, so we didn't do many of those. But then we were doing those 4 food festivals, so we had the maple, the strawberry, the blueberry, and the pumpkin.
Yep.
So we were doing 4 of those. I think we had 3 seasons or more of that. And that was really exciting. And it brought a lot of people to the farm. And that's when my horses really were front and center and, got a lot of love and attention. And again, the pizza oven was fired up, and we were doing themed pizzas. So if it was strawberry season, then we would have like a strawberry pizza with something drizzled, and strawberry milkshakes and strawberry creamies and strawberry this, that, and the other thing. And so I feel like that was a really neat way of bringing people to the farm for an experience. And then, let's see, the retreat was happening somewhere in there. So that was
How many
part of it.
people would typically be at your retreats?
Oh, they were really small, like 4 to 6.
Oh, they're so fortunate, though. What a wonderful
Yeah,
experience.
it was really fun. I did a kids camp for 3 years. So we had children ages 9 to 12 or 9 to 13 for a week. And so they got introduced to the horse piece as well. They got to experience it. I did a slightly different experience with Janice Cooper. I don't know if you ever came across Janice. She since moved to New Hampshire, but she worked, she was renting up at Hillary Mooney's at that gorgeous barn that she has in, I guess that's technically Warren, isn't it?
Is it Warren?
Yeah.
Because there's some good barns in Warren.
Oh my gosh, it is a spectacular barn, and then beautiful paddocks, and
Yeah.
so. But Janice is a life coach also, and she had gotten training in this particular type of equestrian work, which a whole bunch of people from the Valley have actually participated in. In fact, I created one for the Waitsfield Select Board, Planning Commission, and I forget what the other one. There was one more commission or group, and the whole goal was to get them working together.
I was just going to say team building. That
Yeah,
makes
it was really
total
it
sense.
was really fun. It was a great experience. So we did a bunch of these experiences together, she and I, and then any of my retreat people. If Peggy wasn't available, then Janice would do the experience, which was similar but very different style. And then the kids camp, we did the horses, the organic gardening. I think I did vision boards with them. We always made pizza with them, so everyone got to make their own pizza. Some, a little bit of hands-on with cooking and what is it? Little crystal necklaces and earrings, and they make their own gemstone jewelry. That's
Mm-hmm.
what. So that was fun. And then let's see, what else do we do? Farm to Table Festival. Oh, so the starting of the Vermont Farm Immersion Program.
Yeah, tell us about
Yeah,
that.
so that I started a nonprofit for. And the goal was we really want to inspire the next generation of farmers ultimately. And even if somebody doesn't want to become a farmer or have a business that's food related, the goal being how to grow your own food, which now seems even more important
Yeah.
than when we started.
Right.
You know, after COVID, it just feels like it's really important to know how to grow your own food. Despite the climate challenges, like this season has been the worst growing season for Dave in the 30 some odd years that he's been growing.
Everybody's complaining about it.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah. So the farm immersion program is a week long. The first one we had 4 people, and one of the, or 2 of the people were a mother-daughter, both named Hazel, and they're just wonderful people, all 4 of them.
Yeah.
And so the 2 Hazels actually started their own farm. So that was kind of the true mission was, you know, ideally we would love to see people start farms, and they've
So
done that.
how'd you do it? Did you just get them out there in the fields?
So yeah, a lot of it. So I created a whole assessment for them to fill out, so we knew exactly what they were looking for. So if they not only did we teach about growing organic, but we'd also taught the hydroponic. We gave them an herbal experience. We were visiting different places. So we went to see Joe Klimek, I think his name is, the grape vineyard, the one that was first started on East Warren Road. So we did a bunch of field trips. We went to American Flatbread. We went to Gib Geiger's Bees. So we gave them a whole big, and then one of them actually, we did cheese making with the Falaces.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
so I gauged from the responses on the assessment what they were interested in, what they thought they might be, you know, curious to do themselves, and so that's how we decided which field trips to take. And let's see what else. Oh, of course, pizza oven. And then so I would introduce them to things like juicing, and I, you know, interject a little green living stuff here and there, and a lot of gardening, of course, and immersion in nature. Just really seeing what it's like to be on a farm that's a commercial, you know, commercial farm.
A working farm.
Right, as opposed to just a backyard garden, which is what, you know, many of us are used to.
I ran into David recently at a memorial.
Ah.
And, you know, I took one look at him and I thought, I never passed that field where he's not in it lately. And, of course, all the businesses can't find people to work.
Right.
I'm not even going to go into all that because it's a real problem. Everybody knows it.
Right.
But, you know, I went up to him to say hello, and I said, you've lost a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And it's just out there hard working, huh?
Well, I think so we've played with different types of diets like keto and, you know, tried out intermittent fasting. And I think he was doing that at a time when he was starting to sugar. And so that's intense, you know, calorie burning activity when he's traipsing through the woods, fixing lines, tapping trees, and that sort of thing. So I think he actually just didn't get enough calories in him to keep the weight on. So I think he lost about 30 pounds and has not really put it back on because he's just constantly moving. I mean, it was typical for him to lose weight at sugaring time, keep it off all season, and then, you know, for a few months in the winter, he might put on a little bit just because he was not running around like a crazy man.
How does it, well, I've seen, and at the same service, I saw Paul, and Paul clearly had some injury or surgery or something.
Yeah, I did a couple things.
And it made me think, like how, because Paul's not retired. I can barely get the man on the phone. Right?
I know.
But how do you think, as you're watching this family, this extended family that's owned the farm for so long, how does the role change as you get older?
That's a great question. Well, in Paul's case, I don't know that it has.
Well, the surgery stopped him
Yes,
short.
he was laid up for, I think, 6 months because he had had an
really?
ankle surgery, I think it was an ankle replacement. And then 3 days after he was given the green light to walk again, he tripped and fell and broke his leg.
No.
In between the replaced ankle and a replaced knee. So it was like the only piece of real bone. So that's what laid him up. And so I know that made him crazy. But had that not happened, he would still be, you know, all year long in the mill and in the woods. He's returned to it. I don't know how he's doing it because, you know, it's a 100-year-old mill and there's planks of wood that had their spaces between them, so anybody could easily, get caught in between those. But somehow, I mean, it's what gives him joy. And I think particularly his generation of men believe that their worth is related to what they produce. That their livelihood is so important because it defines them. But in Paul's case, he did so much volunteer work.
Yes.
I mean, 60 some odd years on the fire department blows my mind that anybody can do fire department or EMT, because I just don't have the skill set or the ability to handle that kind of trauma on a regular basis. So I'm so incredibly respectful of that. But then, serving on the select board and the cemetery commission and the Odd Fellows and just all these different things.
Yes, we
How
thank
he
him.
had time.
Let's take a moment to thank him for all the
Totally.
years he gave
Totally.
to the Valley.
And that was not unusual for his generation of people. I think
And
it's
especially not in the Valley.
exactly, or maybe in Vermont in particular. I think Vermont, from my observation, is a place where people are much more likely to do and help others. And we see it, of course, when there's a crisis, but even just on a regular day-to-day basis. I feel like even those of us who are transplants get into that mindset of, if somebody needs help, you do whatever you can to help them.
It's up to us.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't
We
look
take
for...
care of our own. We have to.
Exactly. We don't look for some, government entity or whatnot to bail us out. I mean, obviously we have to in certain cases, but we do as much as we can for ourselves.
But I see the culture, the way that the community fund was built and
Yes.
the Interfaith Council.
Exactly.
There are places in times of real trouble that you can turn.
Right. Right. Thank goodness.
Yes, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, my husband tells this story often, that he was very close, or the families were very close to the Barnards up on the Common Road.
Yep.
And in the summer, teenagers were asked to please come and help us hay,
Oh, yes.
right? And they would, and I don't know if they made money or they just got a good meal. I really have no idea about that. But
Probably they didn't make money, because I know stories with hartshorns volunteering to help people whose barn burned down or the cows got out. I mean, people just volunteered their
Right.
time. And then I think the hope, not that they did this with this in mind, but the hope was if they ever needed help, that those neighbors would then return the
this
favor.
is exactly what my understanding. The kids that lived on the Common Road called themselves the Common Kids,
Oh, no kidding.
and they were very close. And what they did was they trade labor, so that, because everybody didn't have all the equipment.
Exactly.
Everybody didn't have enough people, so they would just trade back and forth until all the crops got in.
Yeah.
And somehow, Tommy, growing up in the grocery store, he was asked to do this, and he hated it
Oh, I don't blame him.
profoundly. He said, it taught me right away I didn't want to be a farmer. He liked being in the
is-
store better.
Even Paul says he wouldn't want to do what Dave does.
Really?
Yes. That tells you something.
Yeah.
It is such hard work because it's not just physical, right? There's the mental stress of each day is a new challenge. Like I said, this is the most difficult growing season that he's had in 30 some odd years. So just trying to strategize how to keep animals out of the corn or how to deal with these ridiculously wet conditions. I mean, there's certain things that you have no control over. But the things that you do, you're scrambling to do. Like, we had 18 frosts that we covered the strawberries to protect from. One of them was a 21-degree frost, which should have killed them and the blueberries.
Right.
The only thing I can imagine is that he had read that if you water them, that will help hold a little bit warmer temperature. We put as many row covers as we could, and then I just talked to the nature spirits. And I said, listen, strawberry spirits, and, I must have had some sort of a Native American past life because I feel like this kinship. So I talked to whoever was listening, in my mind, thinking, please help us, protect these plants. I don't know what else we can do. It may or may not have had some impact, but the strawberries survived, and we had to manually pollinate with feather dusters
No.
because there were no bees. And so between all of the things that we did, it was the best strawberry season ever.
This year.
Yeah, it went on for a month. The berries were still huge by the end of it. It was remarkable. So that was
is
one really good crop that survived this.
What kind of animals get into the corn?
Everything. It can be a bear, a skunk, a raccoon. I don't know about those vicious things that eat domesticated cats. The
Fisher cats?
yes, fisher cats. They may also get in there. Birds.
Mm-hmm.
So he's always netting, but something is still getting in under the net. So then he puts out the have-a-heart trap with cat food. I think he caught something once, but nothing's getting caught.
Because they want the corn. They don't want
exactly,
the cat food.
Exactly. So I mean, there's just so many. And then somebody's cows got out loose, and were wandering through his potatoes, and I forget what pumpkins, I think, because he still leases a field from a nearby neighbor. He still does a trade with American Flatbread. You see that his crop area has kind of shrunk from what it used to be because they've created an amazing bunch of gardens and community gardens up there. For
At Flatbread.
Yeah, it's really fun.
lovely.
I send people there all the time to go and experience it because it's just beautiful, and they have animals, which we don't have anymore, and I just feel like it's a fun experience for them, and George does such a great job in the community as well.
Well, absolutely. Another moment to stop and say thank you, George, for
Yes.
all you do.
Indeed.
I'm going to just check the time because I'm so interested in what you're saying. I have a way of forgetting that we do have a limit.
I understand.
I'm curious about the bears. I'm not an animal expert, but even I can see that the bear behavior is very different.
Well, they've become much more acclimated to us, and
Yeah.
they like our garbage.
They do like our garbage, but they also like your corn.
This is true, but I think that's been a common issue for farmers for years. What I understand that bears do that's different than what other animals do is that they pick the corn and they pile it up. And I don't know why they do it that way, but maybe they carry it off to their dens. I really don't understand
But
it.
that's
I
how
kind
you
of need
can
to
tell
research it.
it's bear.
Well, I think you can tell bear because there's so much more destruction, like
Yeah.
plants flattened as opposed to ears taken off. I think that would be the key. And also, if the netting is up, then it's all tangled up and ripped and whatnot. So that would be an indication of a bear.
I have seen. I used to really like to go to zoos because I lived.
I did when I was a kid. But
Yeah.
I hate them now.
I know. I feel the same way. Well, I lived in cities for many years,
Yeah.
and so I like to go to the zoo. I know what a full-bred wolf looks like.
Oh yes.
Okay, I know what it looks like very
Yes.
well. And, I have seen, I don't know, people are calling them coy dogs. They're actually
Oh right.
wolf hybrids,
Right.
according
With
to...
coyote, isn't
yeah,
it?
exactly.
Yeah,
According
that's
to the
the coy
University
part.
of Vermont.
Yeah.
And certainly that made sense to me because I lived out west, and the coyote there is so much smaller.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So I've seen them in the corn rows. Do you ever have problems with them?
Oh. I'm not aware of them being a problem. I think they're more interested in animals,
Okay.
is my sense. I mean, interestingly, I have not really heard them that much this summer. Have you?
No, but on our road, there was a time when many of the neighbors were having free-range chickens,
Oh.
and we had a huge problem with them.
Yeah, we can't keep chickens.
One came, Tommy took the dog out to go for a walk, and it was still dark, and he had a flashlight, and it was right there.
Oh.
So
Yeah,
they
poor
were
chickens
they
have
were
so many
encroaching.
predators.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't leave. I have we always have 3 rescue dogs. 2 of them are really small, and I don't leave them
Yeah.
out.
I don't we have 2 small dogs too, and I don't let them go to the bathroom by themselves
Yeah.
because well, especially when I heard somebody in southern Vermont had a cat taken by some kind of a hawk. And I have this little Chihuahua mix that's easy to pluck off.
Same thing.
Yeah. I'm terrified of that happening.
Mine's about 6 pounds.
Yeah, ours is a little heavier, but still small enough. And even our bigger small dog would probably not be that hard to carry off.
And it just, as long as we're talking about animals, I feel, when I was in college, there was a book that came out, Silent Spring.
Oh gosh, yes, Rachel Carson.
Remember?
Yes, I do.
I feel like in that time period, we've recovered a lot, at least in the state of Vermont.
Yes, I would say Vermont is fairly unique. When you start doing research and you realize that 90% of honeybees have disappeared, and I've talked with people who live in different parts of the United States saying, yeah, we don't really have very many insects, or we don't really have songbirds anymore. I mean, the fact that we still have lightning bugs and, peepers and
Yeah.
frogs and stuff, that's a really good sign, but I don't know how long that will last if we don't smarten up. I mean, there's so many.
So what's going on in your mind that could potentially be dangerous?
So there's a lot of different things. I'm really very puzzled by this whole chemtrail thing. I don't know if you've noticed, but every blue sky day, I look up and I see an airplane going by, and instead of the normal contrail that disappears,
Yeah.
it leaves this white long line, and then it starts to diffuse and it becomes clouds. So the next time if we have another blue sky day, which they've been rare this summer, just kind of pay attention and see if you see that.
So
because,
what is that?
well, so I don't know for sure, but it's supposed to be, people have reported that there's aluminum, barium, and I don't know what else in that. And it's part of the whole geoengineering of trying to control the weather. I know that Biden just recently talked about wanting to do something where they reflect the sun back to the sun, which seems to me a ridiculous idea. Because if we don't have
for
sun,
global warming.
yeah, if we don't have sun, that means we can't grow food. It means our solar panels don't work. I mean, it just, when humans get into this mindset of thinking that we can somehow change the way nature works is where I feel we get into trouble. And the pesticide use, like glyphosate, is one of my really pet peeves. It's the active ingredient in Roundup.
Right.
It is banned in 32 countries, and then whole genetically modified organisms. So the corn, for example, that is bred to resist that Roundup glyphosate chemical, it'll survive being doused with it. And the whole promise was, back when they first introduced this, was, oh, this is going to reduce the amount of herbicides that we're using, and it hasn't. It's actually risen. I mean, even Forbes magazine did an article about it, that, herbicide use has increased with GMOs, not decreased. Rachel Carson was definitely the first one that really sounded the alarm, and I think things did improve. I know, growing up in New York, going to Long Island in the summer, at that time in the 70s, there were all kinds of disgusting stuff was washing up on the beaches.
It was
you
awful.
probably remember that too, right? So I feel like we were better then, but then, I mean, look at these crazy train derailments with all these different chemicals, and the wildfires are a huge problem. I just heard that there's 1,000 wildfires in Canada right now.
Yeah.
Those weird smoky days that we've gotten, which oddly don't even smell like smoke to me. So there's just so many different issues going on. When I lived in Massachusetts, I lived in Marblehead for most of the time that I was there. And that's where I started to kind of wake up to all of this environmental stuff. It was a little bit before that, when I was pregnant with my daughter. And I started to research, and I was learning all these different things of, what's in these everyday household products that we use, and how come nobody's, regulating them, or much less telling people about them. I had started writing letters to the editor in the newspaper and getting a conversation going in the community. And it was very interesting, because there were people that were really open and on board, and then there was sort of the Better Living Through Chemicals crowd that was like, oh, much ado about nothing, or they were like, everything causes cancer, so why bother? So I did an Earth Day celebration there, which kind of jump-started an environmental movement, really, because I had workshops, I had all these green vendors, I had organic food, live music, a farmer was shearing sheep. It was really cool. And then shortly thereafter, we found out that that little tiny seacoast community had 3 types of cancer above the state average. And people freaked out. And I kind of felt like, wow, that's just interesting timing. All of a sudden people are starting to wake up, and then we find out that this really serious problem.
Right.
So I started another nonprofit.
It happens so often, though.
It does. And then there's cancer clusters everywhere. And somebody was telling me about a cancer cluster in the Common Road area. I don't know anything about that other than one person telling me that she knew of a lot of people with cancer. But yeah.
What you're making me think of is the interview we were talking about with Paul Hartshorn and his siblings. I was struck immediately. Well, first I was struck by how close they are and how funny they are.
Yeah.
And, they talked about growing up on a farm and how you really counted on family
Yes.
for entertainment. And just, I asked Butch, I said, didn't you resent having a job so early? And he's like,
that's
no.
Interesting.
No, because it was a job it needed to be done.
Yeah.
So there was that I took away. I was also shocked to find out there were 4 babies born and 4 babies lived.
Oh, yes.
Infant mortality
That's right.
was really high back then.
Yeah.
And then I look at them now as elders, and they're all doing pretty darn well.
Yeah.
And you got to think it's the environment, the food they ate,
I
all
think
of
so.
it.
Yep.
And they
and
all
the
still
hard
work.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think there's I don't know if they've ever done research on this, but there's a saying that farm kids tend to be healthier than other kids because they're exposed to so many different things in the soil and, just the hard work, the sunshine, the fresh air. It's a lot different than growing up in an indoor environment that's, antiseptic and
Right.
not fresh air.
And gosh knows what.
Yeah.
So we're almost there. We're almost at time.
Okay.
You could do me a big favor. You go home, ask David if he'll come on.
I absolutely will. I'm sure he will.
Because it'd be fun to have that different perspective.
Yeah, no, he's got some great stories and really interesting perspective, having been a hartshorn for all of his life.
Well, I haven't coined these families the historic families. And I'm just more and more interested about all the stories. Because, it wasn't that long ago. ... It wasn't that long ago.
Right.
This valley was very different.
Well, and that's one of the things that I find really fascinating is to find out about all these little farm homesteads. Everybody had a family cow. They grew their own food. They would trade with neighbors. It's much like what my great aunt JoJo, who lived in Morgantown, West Virginia, did. I loved going to her house with Uncle Harry and her big garden, and she would trade with her neighbors for chicken. So I would have a roast chicken and those beefsteak tomatoes sliced with a little bit of salt.
Oh, it's that time
It
of
was
year,
amazing.
too.
Yes,
it's
it
like
is.
we're eating corn and tomatoes every day
Yes.
till it's done.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, Amy, thanks so much for coming on. I really
pleasure.
appreciate it. It was so nice of you to write to me. And
pleasure.
it's fun to hear about the different ways you're using the farm, because I just have some, I don't know, stereotypes in my head, and you just kind of blew them all up, and I love it.
Thank you.
So we're going to say goodbye. This is episode 12 of Take Me Back, the interviews. I'm hoping very much to get 20 done this year before Tommy and I will disappear when the snow flies, probably, and pick it back up next spring and hopefully do another 20. So if you know anybody that you think should be interviewed, let me know. I'm easy to find. You can just MaryKathleenMehuron.com. That's my website. It has my email right on it. And thanks for watching. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure.